Because fundamentally, I think most outcomes that matter are not driven just by product or PMs. They're driven by the org as a whole. And so you need to make sure that the features you build are translated to the go-to-market side and you have their support to actually package and sell those features.
I'm Pulkit Agrawal, and this is the Product Lunchbox, the bite-sized series for product people. In less time than it takes for you to eat lunch, we'll share some distilled insights and tactics from an experienced product operator on a single topic per episode. Today's guest, Maggie Chen, might change the way you think about product-led growth. She's a product manager at Ada, which is an AI-backed automation solution for customer interactions. They power more than 4 billion interactions with companies like Verizon, Yeti, Square, Canva, and more. She's led product-led growth and helped quadruple inbound wins and powered 40x revenue growth. She transitioned from a designer to a PM, and that's what we're going to be talking about this episode. Maggie, really excited to have you on the Product Lunchbox. I love your background. I noticed you've got such a variety.
Yeah, I think I definitely took the garden path to land where I am. I feel like my modus operandi throughout most of my career is just to say yes more than I say no and figure out what I wanted to do that way.
I find that a lot of the people who are most successful do have that winding history. But at Ada, you're spearheading product growth. You created the first product-led growth roadmap. We'll talk more about that. You had an amazing impact on win rates, like quadrupling the inbound win rate, and been formative in helping launch AI-powered features. So lots to get through, but maybe let's just start with kind of what inspired your transition from being a designer, focus on design, to product management.
To be totally honest, as I kind of hinted at, I realized I wanted to be a PM in the same way I discovered design, by just saying yes to doing things and then realizing I enjoyed it. I think back when I was designing, just as a normal product designer here at Ada, I found myself kind of stretching into doing PM-like tasks. I didn't know it at the time that these were PM jobs, but I would do things like collaborate really closely with my PMs on the roadmaps, like, hey, have you thought about this? Like, let's reframe that. Is this the right sequencing? I would like flesh out sections of their PRDs. So I'd look at the outline, make the designs, and then when I put the designs in, I would like write out, things that engineers should think about. I did quite a bit of UX research in my history. I think even when I was a designer, I thought of myself as more of like a research-oriented designer. So I would do a lot of big projects to understand user needs, understand how the org functioned, understand how systems should be architected. And I worked pretty closely with engineers, which I didn't think was strange until I had one PM tell me, yeah, it's great that you just hop on huddle calls directly and figure things out and I don't have to be involved. So that, it culminated in me eventually raising my hand for even more glue work. I wound up working on a product feedback process redesign, which is very not typical design work, but it had a big impact on the org here at Ada and gave me a lot of visibility to the broader product team. I think that was kind of what seeded the thought in product leadership's head that oh, this designer here, one day, maybe she could be a PM.
Yeah, I find that even at Chameleon, we've given our designers more responsibility and encouraged them to act like product owners a bit more. And so that translates in the specs. So when they do design in Figma, they're often writing notes around edge cases or kind of things to be wary of at run implementation, or they're doing phasing in Figma, hey, this is phase 1, this is phase 2. And we trust them to do that, and they're well positioned to do that. So it's meant that our product, some of that stuff, which I think makes sense for designers to be closer to the engineering team for anyway, and reduces cycle times, which we care a lot about. But also it leaves the product management to think about other things. And they don't have to be hey, we're going to be the interface between engineering and design that. We can elevate both the engineer and the designer to do that. So we've been enjoying that. So I'm curious, kind of what does the interaction look like between you, design, and engineering now, tactically as you kind of build features?
I think we have a similar culture here at Ada where quite a lot of our engineers and designers are very product minded, and it leaves product space to really take on the work of product vision, product strategy, leadership, rallying stakeholders outside product to bring the company together to drive outcomes. Because fundamentally, I think most outcomes that matter are not driven just by product or PMs. They're driven by the org as a whole. And so you need to make sure that the features you build are translated to the go-to-market side, and you have their support to actually package and sell those features. So the way we work is typically PMs will do initial prioritization, maybe a bit of discovery with customer calls, but you're really just picking up the scent of a problem. It's very lightweight. And I will bring my designer and my engineering manager into the conversation as early on as possible. So when I have the barest jot list of what we might do next quarter, I'm in huddles with them to talk through, this is what I'm thinking. Does this make sense? Do you have bandwidth? Do we have capacity? Things like that. And then by the time we have a roadmap kind of more fleshed out, it is never a surprise to my team. Like they know everything. And oftentimes they are the ones who suggested scope or suggested sequencing as part of that roadmap. By the time we get to the design phase and the delivery phase, things flow, I think, a lot more smoothly because they've had that context. My designers are able to help me scope things and push back on some of my scope priorities based on their understanding of user needs and where they flesh things out. And then engineering is able to work a lot more directly with design because they both have that product context already. And they're able to navigate edge cases, figure out what works, what doesn't work. You know, I'm usually very lightweight when it comes to build time as a result. I get to focus on how do we launch? How do we position? How do we sell? And I only get pulled in when there truly is a question of we can't build this. What's the priority? How do we cut scope? That's when I'll jump in the conversation. But I find it just a very fruitful relationship where design, engineering, and product are able to represent their perspective. So user needs, technical constraints, business goals, and have an effective level of productive tension where I don't have to micromanage. They don't have to, micromanage me either. And we're able to come together and have productive conversations and just ship things quickly.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's also really represents how the shift in the product management role is kind of happening now, especially with products being central to revenue, or product usage being quite closely tied to business revenue. Before we had often a sales-led motion. So it was a little bit more distance. Now, a user has to engage in the product, or often there's usage-based pricing. So PMs just have to be closer to revenue. Or we're seeing that revenue teams, sales teams, go-to-market teams care about the early product experience because that influences win rates, right? So as revenue and product have gotten closer in the last few years, it also makes sense for the product manager to be the business revenue perspective in this triad as well. So I feel like the way that you're approaching it also kind of makes that easier.
Mm-hmm.
I was at a talk recently where Clairvaux was saying that the three kind of engineering, design, and product people, the triad leadership, may compress to one person who can do more, get further in design, get further in engineering, and have the product role. So and enabled by AI, of course. I'm curious, in this age, what do you think that PMs should focus on? Should they be doing more design work? Should they be doing more engineering work? Should they stay closer to the business? Any perspectives on how they should change? And yeah, let's start there.
Yeah, this is a great question. Candidly, I actually agree with you. I think the dirty secret in these discipline definitions is that the lines are very blurred. I think it takes a certain mix of skills to ship a great product. Those skills are often split across three roles, PM, design, and engineering, but they don't have to be. You see startups with two co-founders or a single founder that does all of those jobs. I think in the age of AI, it's interesting because in some ways, I don't think the core skills have changed. I think that the core skill for a product manager, but also, hint, hint, I think this is a core skill for great designers and engineers as well. That core skill is problem definition. Being able to find the right problem to solve, to ask the right questions, have an intuition for what a truly good quality experience or right-sized scope feels like, formulating research questions out of vague feelings and building relationships with customers and stakeholders. These are hard problems, and they're problems that I don't think machines are really going to be able to imitate for a long time. I'll give an example here. I use generative AI day to day for basic research and copy editing. But when I try to ask ChatGPT to help me with an actual product strategy, it really, really sucks at that. And I find myself spending far more time prompt engineering and figuring how to convey the context I have and explain what I need it to do, that at the end of the day, it's just not worth it. I could have taken the time to write the document myself. And I think this is rooted in the fact that the human ability to define a problem clearly based on the most vague, poorly communicated feelings is still so challenging to imitate with machines. And it's also why managing an intern or getting vague feedback from leadership is so frustrating for us. That said, as I hinted at before, I do think some jobs are at risk with AI. AI is going to just be an output multiplier. So those handful of folks that have a very good handle on problem definition, they have great intuition, great taste, they're going to be able to leverage generative AI to do more with less. And I suspect that a lot of companies are going to get the same work done with fewer workers. I think that this actually makes the pipeline really challenging for juniors. I remember trying to break into design. It was really, really hard. Same with product management. People rarely hire junior or associate designers and PMs. And I think that AI is just going to make that even harder.
Yeah, I wonder if, people will have to showcase their skills by doing it on their own first. Like, I think, if a designer can build a product and take it to market and then they apply for a designer role, they're in good stead. If you're like, hey, I've just studied design and now I'm taking my first job, like that's tough. So I think that may mean, there's an opportunity for people who are proactive with AI and the fact that they have many more tools. You can prototype so quickly with Claude. Like you can do your own projects and almost encourage everyone to be doing some of these projects. I know, well, opportunity, change will come, but there's opportunity. And I think what you said about the GPT or AI not, reverting to a mean, I think that's one of the things I've been thinking about is how do I fill it with context? How can I, give it as much knowledge about me and my role and my headspace as possible? It sounds a bit like Westworld, but honestly, that's when it can give me more specific and relevant answers for me. So that's a project that I've been working on, which is kind of interesting. Okay, let's
That's
transition
super cool.
let's talk about growth. You're part of Ada's growth team. You've kind of been part of the founding kind of the growth team. So maybe tell me a bit more about that. Like, how did it come about and kind of how's it different to the core product team?
I've definitely learned a lot in the past year about how they are quite different, but also in some ways not so different. So a bit about how it started. We had a product director here, Crystal Lamb, who really believed that product-led was both a valid way to drive leads and also a great way to force the product to elevate its quality. Because if you're going to be product-led, you really need to get the UX right. So she had tasked my product team at the time to put together an experiment to test that idea. I was still a designer at the time, and we built a freemium tier of Ada to trial the generative AI agent that we had at the moment. We ran this for a couple of quarters, and it worked out really well. We landed our first qualified opportunity within 1 month. It closed a month later, and that customer is still with us today. They'd expanded a year later on their contract. This was the proof point that leadership needed to fully invest in a growth team, to try to figure out what does it mean to put a team where their sheer focus is on improving that buyer user journey and using that to nudge users to adopt, to purchase, to activate. So that's where it came from. Our first roadmap was actually pretty not traditional growth. We did a nav refresh. We took a look at enabling self-serve sign-up through the free trial, added a homepage, made it easier to bring content into your AI agent. And only after we did that kind of a facelift were we confident in launching the free trial, which also wound up working really well for us. Back to your question about core product versus growth teams. I think that the difference here is a bit of nuance in their focus. Core product teams are very focused on helping users achieve specific goals, often in a very particular part of the product. So they may own a feature area, a specific persona's journey. They have to balance user goals against prospect demands, against, the reliability and performance of the product and long-term vision. And the hope is that by balancing those things properly, it will drive business value and more people will buy the product. So you're looking at users that perceive business value. Growth is slightly different. Growth's focus is about getting users to realize that buying and using the product will help them achieve their goals. So it's a slight shift. What this results in is growth teams tend to be more reactive. They are more likely to prioritize quick wins based on recent learnings. In a lot of senses, growth teams are like a behavioral lab. Like we're here, like we care a little less about explaining why something is happening or why something is working. We just throw things at the wall and see if it sticks. And it's a little more trial and error. Whereas core product, they're planning for longer term wins. They're planning for where's the trajectory of this product going. Having said that, like despite these different foci, I think for you to deliver a cohesive user experience, both core product and growth teams need to be very bought in and informed on the overall user journey. They need to collaborate closely to deliver that cohesive project experience. Like growth has to understand user needs for experiments to work. And core product has to understand those immediate business needs to prioritize their roadmaps effectively.
So part of the output of this is that you have separate roadmaps. Now, I presume the core product roadmap is maybe a bit more fleshed out or longer term, and the product-led growth roadmap is shorter term. But tell us more about this PLG roadmap. How does it come to be? Tell us and give us some tips on if other teams are also kind of trying to tease apart like how a growth team should function versus a core product team.
So I'll first talk about the things that actually are very different. Both core product and growth product teams, their roadmaps should, at the end of the day, be based on outcomes. You are looking at a different focused outcome each quarter, and you're thinking through the outputs that you can ship to drive towards that outcome. The difference, I think, lies in the time frame between outputs existing and having an impact on the outcomes. I think most core product teams, that time frame is long. Like the actual outcomes that they care about, like, oh, did this particular feature address that user problem? Did releasing this feature that prospects have been asking about actually unblock deals and actually result in more expansions, more conversions? There's more of a time lag there between the two. The outcomes are more of a lagging indicator. With growth, the time frame is typically slightly shorter, and the outcomes that growth is focused on are ones that we are more confident we can actually make an impact on over the course of just one quarter or two. And that cause to effect is a lot tighter and it's easier to kind of experiment with. There also is, I think, it can be challenging for core product teams to adjust their roadmap focuses on the fly compared to growth teams. Like for growth, each quarter we are looking to move a single business metric. It might be retention, conversion, activation. And if the outputs we've produced that quarter don't move that metric enough, we just continue working on that metric the next quarter. It's pretty straightforward. With core product teams, because they're often building towards a specific product vision or some kind of like feature that they haven't quite figured out how to really structure how to build, they have to learn from customer needs. But at the end of the day, customers are expecting that feature to be delivered. That expectation makes it more challenging for core product teams to shift reactively. They have to make more trade-offs around scope and reliability and their focuses each quarter. Because growth is more of an intervention team, we don't have customers chomping at the bit for what we deliver. Oftentimes, we are pushing things to these customers to make them change their behavior. It's a lot more business-led, and we don't have as much obligation to do things based on customer demand.
It sounds like what it means is that the constraints are different. It's like, with the product roadmap, you have a kind of more of a time constraint. With the growth roadmap, it's more of a metric constraint. You're going to try and move that metric. So yeah, hopefully that's a good way for folks to think about, what goes onto their roadmap. Like, can they, and maybe the roadmap is defined more like, around metrics and targets for growth and more around, value that you're delivering to users for core.
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it.
So if you want to learn more about product, what do you do? Where do you go? What are your favorites?
So my categories of resources are podcasts, people, and books. My go-to podcasts are obviously Lenny's podcast. I think everyone listens to that, but also Product Tea with Leah. She is a growth PM based out of Europe, and she just has a very nice perspective to help you think beyond shipping roadmap outputs to specific user needs. She forces me as a PM to think more about the entire business engine and how product fits into that. People, and then Erica Hall for right-sizing research. I think research is still at the core how I operate. Like that's how I size my experiments and decide what to do as a PM. On that same theme, a great book to check out is Validating Product Ideas. Validating product ideas is just a very like concise framing for how to answer specific questions you have as a PM through research methods that are like very like guerrilla, small, doable. You're a tiny startup, you can still do it. Also, very much love the book Product Management in Practice. That is the best book I've read recently that describes the day-to-day work of a PM and has super actionable advice and case studies in it. Finally, this is maybe a little non-typical. I love facilitation books. One of my favorite is Game Storming. I find that as a PM, your main value add is you're a force multiplier for the people that you work with. And Game Storming is just chock full of tools to stop wasting time in meetings. You have all these stakeholders in a room. It's an expensive block of time. You need to use the right tools to get the right insights out of those stakeholders. And Game Storming is full of those tools.
Wow, amazing. So many recommendations and a couple that I'm not familiar with. So looking forward to checking those out.